Well, Sir Keir Starmer is fronting the media over and over again to condemn some of those who are
Yeah.
rioting, but not all of them.
Whatever the apparent motivation, this is not protest, it is pure violence, and we will not tolerate attacks on mosques or our Muslim communities. So the full force of the law will be visited on all those who are identified as having taken part.
Elon Musk tweeted a response to that. He said, "Shouldn't you be concerned about attacks on all communities?" And Darren, it's a good point. I've seen horrendous footage of gang attacks on individuals. Most are too violent to show here, but there's been little coverage in the mainstream media. In fact, if it not for X, I don't think we would see the scale of this violence.
Well, exactly, Rita. Why do you think they want to shut X down for disinformation? That's going to be the new mantra. Sir Keir Starmer, mark my words, will team up with Brussels, with the European Union, to actually clamp down on X for, quote unquote, disinformation. Deeply worrying, because you are absolutely spot on that without X, we wouldn't see this footage. It would be censored. It would be removed. So the fact of the matter here is that Sir Keir Starmer, I think, after what we saw, I mentioned Birmingham, just last night in Birmingham, cars been attacked by a massive mob, and there were pubs, as I mentioned, being attacked too. Sir Keir Starmer needs to come out today and say, actually, look, I think that the police ought to not be two-tier, because we now call it two-tier policing, and actually two-tier Keir, because that's who he is. He believes in one side being robustly, arrested and all the rest of it, but the other side, no police intervention whatsoever. So there starts to become, actually, it looks like the conspiracy of the media and the police and the political class. You start to see that actually you don't have to have a tinfoil hat on to see a conspiracy of silence occurring here. So I think if he was any kind of statesman, he would come out and condemn violence on all sides. But Rita, he has refused to do that. He says there is no two-tier policing going on in Britain. I don't know what he's looking at, but I'd love to show him all of the footage that I've been putting out over recent days that paints a very different picture. Middlesbrough, not too far away from me, people were being hit with tools and implements, and the riot police were just stood by. We have really scary times in Britain, and Elon Musk would know a thing or two about not focusing on all communities and instead focusing on one community. Because, for example, white communities in South Africa, where he hails from, have actually been told by elected members of parliament that actually, kill whites was one mantra that actually was propagated there. So I don't want my country to end up in that kind of ethnic gang warfare,
Yes, absolutely. Now, I want to ask you about that two-tier policing, because the Chief of London's Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley, was asked that question, but he didn't answer it. Instead, he snatched at a Sky News journalist's microphone and then dropped it. This is after he came out of an emergency meeting with the Prime Minister over these ongoing riots. Let's have a look at that footage.
Are we going to end two-tier policing, sir?
Darren, there is considerable pressure on the police. These accusations of two-tier policing are not new, but they have certainly intensified in the past week, and there's plenty of evidence for it. You talked about it before. Is the faith in the police force being diminished throughout these riots?
It absolutely is. When the police were established, Robert Peel said, without fear, without favour, actually the police would be there for all. There would be no politics injected into the police force. I'm afraid they have been infected with that diversity, equity and inclusion, that whackery and wokery over law and order. And that's a real problem for faith and trust within the police force. It's not just the Metropolitan Police, which governs the whole of London, but actually it's most of England, much of England. And the issue here is that we start to see the seeds, I think, of severe distrust in the media, in the police, in politicians. And what does that do for a democracy such as ours? You know, an old democracy that's been a beacon of hope and optimism and a message to the world of what a democracy could look like. And I see that tearing apart at the seams right now. The social fabric of the country is being picked apart. And until we get a grip of this, until we actually say that the police need to police all of these protests, because Rita, I've covered with you before. Do you remember the Black Lives Matter protests that took place in London in 2020? The police took the knee to those protesters during the weekly hate marches on the streets of London, in which you had people calling for jihad and intifada and calling for the genocide of the Jews. You saw the police with a very hands-off approach. They did not go near those protesters whatsoever as they stood over war memorials.
They arrested Jews for wearing Star of David. They threatened to arrest Jews for possibly inciting the crowd just by being Jewish and being in the city. So yeah, their conduct has been, I think, deplorable, and I think that distrust is there for a reason. Now, Darren, before you go, I just want to show you a headline that has not aged too well. It was only a month ago, after Labor's landslide victory, that the Financial Times ran this headline: Britain is now a beacon of stability. And it gets worse. The piece claimed that Britain's economic peers like US, France, Germany are awash with political turmoil right now, whilst the Labor Party's strong majority at least signals high predictability. Well, that has not been the case, Darren. We've had the shortest of honeymoons for Keir Starmer, and really the underlying issues here are deep, and putting a band-aid on the current unrest isn't going to stop the next lot of turmoil that's going to pop up, because these issues need addressing at the core level. We always love speaking to you, Darren Grimes. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thanks, Rita.